Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and I want you to imagine a scenario where you're in a life or death situation. You go to call 911 and no one answers the phone. What we're going to be talking about today is what happens when addicts are attempting to get into recovery. They call an addiction treatment center and no one answers the phone. While initially it doesn't sound like life or death, for many of these people struggling with addiction, it can be a turning point in their life where they decide no longer to get help or seek recovery because they feel like people don't care, they feel rejected, or sometimes when people are struggling with addiction, there's far and few chances between where they want that recovery, and you got to take advantage of that. So, how do we go about dealing with this situation? Well, today's guest reached out to me to talk about just that. I was very impressed with what we're going to get into today because this is a new step forward in prevention, in recovery, and in saving lives. And so I'm really excited to have a very powerful conversation today. Mr. Dave Sichel, so great to have you here. And like I said, excited to talk about what you've created and this issue that isn't just an issue you saw out there. This is something you personally experienced. So I'm excited to get into that. So let's go ahead and start with just a brief introduction of who you are.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Whiskey. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate, I had little scheduling issues in the beginning. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. I listened to some of your podcasts. I think your content's really good. But as far as I go, yes, you're right. My personal story is it really ties into my business, which is if you can live that, you're living a blessing. So if you could, in my life, my goal, my personal goal, beyond family, friends, all that, is to help the still suffering addicts. So just to take a step back, I had a business before called Sober Transport, where I would actually take people to treatment. Got certified, but it's funny how things happen because I was working with admissions departments, but I had no idea at that point that this would come 5 years later. So what happened was I went to so I had the work with the admissions. That business closed down because of COVID. Did some other things during COVID, after COVID, and then when the AI boom, I guess you want to call it, started to come, I signed onto a platform called it was called Go High Level, and it's a great platform. The only thing was I knew the AI wasn't robust enough for me to be able to roll out the treatment center. So what I always say is when somebody finally reaches out after interventions, maybe they've been to treatment 6 times, 7 times, whatever it is, um, there is an issue if the phone's not answered. And what we found is about in one area, 60% of the phone calls weren't answered after 5 p.m. They would go to voicemail. So briefly, I designed an AI. Uh, AI could do anything. That the biggest myth is takes jobs away. Our AI is a tool for admissions departments and also being able to answer the phone in that moment of clarity that somebody has rather than going to voicemail, rather than just a call center that might not be speaking you clearly to them, or during the night may be an issue. That's the in my personal experience, like we were talking about, that's my thing. Like I know that when I had my moment of clarity, if there wasn't somebody on the other end of the phone, it wouldn't have been good. And it doesn't last long. So that's a brief kind of thing. I know it's a little longer, but brief.
Right, right. No, I totally agree because, like we said, you have to take advantage of those opportunities. And one of the abilities of AI is staffing because 24/7 staffing can be a huge issue for companies, especially smaller independent companies, especially just with the work ethic and workforce nowadays. So, having an AI that can cover those shifts that are not as easy to find employees for or to man, or certain times even it's not always an issue of not answering the phone because of staffing, but just because of the volume of calls, especially with people being more addicted than ever before. We have high numbers of people trying to get recovery. So we have a lot more people who are addicted. We have a lot more people trying to get recovery. So now you have the same amount of lines, but more people, right? So I think this is a great thing that we're going to get into more detail. But I want to start first backtracking a little bit with your personal story of addiction. Of course, we want to get to know you a little bit about what was the cause of it. Looking back now, obviously in the moment you don't always realize it, but you've been sober and you've been able to look back and reflect on life and get into recovery. So what was kind of the root cause and origin of this, and how did that unfold in life?
Yes. So for my addic so I always really felt that I was an addict. Like I acted out on different things before drugs, and that was like fantasy. Like I just always felt that I didn't want to be myself. And my journey started really early. When I was 16 years old, it was 1980. I know that sounds like a lifetime ago, and it probably is for some. But so anyway, so I got clean. I went to treatment. I got clean, sober, and what happened was I stayed clean for 17 years. And then I had this great idea. I was married, a different life, married with kids. And when you're looking for a reason to relapse, right? It when you're in that mode of relapse, like away from working, a program of recovery, whatever path you take. But once you stop that, your disease, in my opinion, finds a way in, right? So mine was talking to me saying, you know what, you were really young. Maybe it was a phase. We didn't know then all the things we know now. We did know a lot of things. I was going to 12-step fellowship. That was there, even though it was newer in my area. I was still going, big part of it, sponsored people. But I had this, well, turned out to not be a great idea, but I thought it was a great idea at the time, and that would be to smoke pot with my wife. Pot's not a big deal. Wasn't while I was in treatment. I'm a different guy. A million reasons why I smoked. And, that story didn't end well, And then and another event happened. I was in bad shape, moment of clarity, got clean again. This time, stayed clean 5 years. And I know it's going to sound a little like this isn't repeating this thing, but the disease of addiction, in my opinion, the insanity of it is doing the same thing time after time, again, expecting different results. So we were talking about it actually funny in the meeting last night about, I was telling somebody after 5 years, I had this idea that I could smoke pot with my wife. And that's not a rerun, but it is of what I said earlier. Because if we would be talking now, then instead of now, I would convince you, because when you separate from the people in recovery, in my opinion, there's a lot of other tools, but just to focus on that one, an addict alone is in bad company,
Mm.
So what
Yep.
I did
Yep.
is I used again, same result as before, same exact thing. This time, 12 and a half years ago, I came back, and it's funny, the rehab I went back to is a client of mine now.
Mm.
So when I go in there for meetings and stuff, I see people at admissions, and you get to talk, say hello, usually waiting a few minutes. They're like, hey, does it work? I'm like, hey, I was coming in with my trash bags 12 and a half years ago. And now this is I'm here on business. But, that's just one of the benefits of recovery. So I dug in. I did it for myself. I haven't had any crazy ideas like pot's okay. My whole life, really, like I said earlier, besides family, friends, and I have a good network of people, sponsor. I go to 3 meetings a week still, and mostly beyond trying to do everything I can to help anybody I can. I go to the prison up here once a week. Uh, it's about 45 minutes away from me, and me and another guy go every week, and we bring the message of hope into places where people need it the most. Now, that prison didn't let us, I had it before, they didn't let us in right away for about 5 years. It was all Zoom like this. But now we're in. We started with one guy coming. Now 7 guys are coming. I say that because, I have a belief in a higher power. And I feel like that's part of why I'm back. I got to give back, to keep it. I don't want to get too cliche on you, but so my point is through the whole thing is I know what it's like to be clean, get all the benefits of being clean, all the things that happen. I know what it's like to break away and then use and then back in addiction in a short time. So I know the feelings of, all that. And, I know at the end of the podcast, you usually say, do you have anything for our viewers? But what I could tell you is just listen to me and other people. It's never over. If you're not sure today, just call somebody. We'll make sure they answer the phone, but call somebody, reach out to a friend, a pastor, whoever it is. You're never alone. So I know that's usually the ending code, but I just felt like saying it there. So that's a brief history.
Right, and you hit on some great points that we've discussed before on the show. One of the strongest points being something we've talked about a lot is the justification and rationale of an addict. We've talked
Mhm.
about the reason can be the most minimal or not even logical reason, but addicts try to leverage anything to justify using again or to
Mhm.
continue using. So in the past we've shared examples of from my own personal life with my father who struggles with addiction. Every holiday is a reason to drink or do drugs, or
Mm.
what he and some
Mhm.
other addicts who have been on the show have talked about is it's not, gin, it's soju, or it's not vodka, it's whiskey, or it's just a glass of wine, or whatever it is. And the most
Mhm.
interesting one, because you mentioned pot, we've heard, well, I'm only addicted to alcohol. I can use drugs or vice versa. But you talked about, hey, maybe I was always an addict. Maybe that was just my personality, or maybe I've always struggled with that. And I've seen a lot of addicts are just addictive in nature and personality, whatever it is. That not only is it with alcohol or drugs, but it's with a lot of other parts of their lifestyle. Of course, I've also interviewed some people who can handle liquor, not drugs, or vice versa. I think one of the things we talk about the most on the show is, uniqueness and individuality. Some people, their best recovery method has been going cold turkey by themselves, but a lot of people have said, I need a community. I need to go every week. I don't care if I've been sober for 30 years. It's waiting for me in the corner. Like you said, it's always looking for that chance to come back. I agree with that 100%. And we've talked to a lot of doctors and addicts both who have mentioned that. And it's so important to always be alert, to be on guard for that. And I think recently with Matt Grace, that was a great interview. He talked about God doesn't relapse and the life he lived that almost killed him with sex, drugs, and alcohol and addiction. And one of the things he mentioned is he said his best form of sobriety was service, was volunteering and helping other people and finding that greater purpose and identity while also having community within that. So it really is a multifaceted opportunity for both addicts and just people. I always encourage everyone to get out and help serve others. It's humbling for yourself. It gives you a great perspective on life, and it occupies your time and helps shape your purpose and identity. Now, you mentioned being part of a transportation service for addiction, so I just want to get into that a little bit about how that worked and how that kind of came into your life.
Yeah. So crazy enough, when you're in early recovery, you're trying to just focus 100% on recovery. For me, that's my path, right? Again, and I agree with. I just want to take a step back. I agree with what you're saying. Everybody has their own path. I have a proven method that works and a proven method that doesn't work. And so what happened? So for me, I was driving Uber, just getting my life back together. And people used to go. Most people, believe it or not, would go a few places. Obviously, the airport, but I'm outside Philadelphia, and there's a big town here that everybody's heard of, is Kensington. It's I don't know if everybody's heard of it, but it's pretty popular. It's like one of the biggest drug places in the world. So people would either go there, or once in a while, I would take somebody to treatment. And I thought to myself, here's the problem. If I OD in the back of this car, which for me, and I know a lot of other addicts' story is we're going to get as high as we can because it's our last hurrah. So if I'm taking pills, shooting dope, whatever, drinking in the back of the car, and I need to be Narcan, what can an Uber driver do? How many people die at that point, right?
Mm,
And I'm
mm,
not putting anything in Uber. That's not the service they offer. So what I did is I went out. I went door to, not door to door, but calls, LinkedIn, everything with treatment centers and said, hey, look, I'll go there. I'll, I got certified in recovery, especially in my state, and also in interventions. And what I did was I said, look, we talk about the call, but one of the other pain points for treatment center is the door, right? Getting somebody out of the door.
mm.
So I started to do it. And, I felt like I was able to deliver results because people that would have never came, that would have put it off, had come to treatment. On a personal level, I mean, even though was a business, on a personal level, that helped me a lot. I talked recovery and my own experience all the way down. But the turning positive point to that, and I was going to tell you before we started, is I do have a dog who sometimes likes to bark on Zoom. I was going to tell you that before there. But the reason I say that is I got a rescue. He was 5 years old, not for this reason again. And about 6 months or a year into the business, I started bringing him on the rides. We would go 8, 10 hours up and back, 8 hours up, 8 hours back, whatever. But you would be surprised how many people I think I wouldn't have gotten unless I said I had a dog in the car. And people used to fall asleep on them,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it gives people comfortability, and he's been great for me. Like I said, he was a 5 years old rescue. It was a friend of mine in recovery who was fostering him, and he said, "Just take him home tonight. If you don't like him, bring him back." Which is the craziest line that you could tell somebody with dog. 7 years later, he's still here. But my point being that I knew the connection. We were interviewed, not, well, he didn't say anything, but me and him were interviewed. Um, there were stories about us. But if you remember in 2020, or even 2019 when COVID started. Oh, towards the end of that, I wasn't taking the dog. I was doing flights. So I would
Mm.
fly up to, say, Maine, right? Meet the person, take them on the flight, maybe change planes and go down to the treatment center, right?
Wow.
So it was going to that too. But nobody knew what it was a big thing in the treatment industry because nobody knew what the protocols were for COVID, obviously, but
Right.
also for
Right.
treatment. It's an essential service, right? Like it's life or death for people, right? So it's essential that way. But also the other part of it is that what do you do? Like, do you bring somebody to treat? Are you liable if you bring somebody to treatment that has COVID? This early COVID, I'm saying, has
Right.
COVID, didn't wear a mask or wore a mask, whatever it is, and gets the rest of the center sick. We didn't know anything. So I closed it down for that reason. And I just don't have the strength and energy to, do those long rides again. Unless it's not for business. It's a friend of mine or somebody I know I meet that needs to get to treatment. I gladly do that in my personal life, but not as a business. Just, I'll take it, we're friends, whatever. So yeah, that was Silver
Right.
Transport.
No, I completely agree. That's a long journey. It seems like you often went out of your way pretty far just to help one individual sometimes, and I think that's amazing. I never even thought about the amount of people using a door drive or a driving service, like Uber or similar Lyft to go to those kinds of places. And like you said, their last hurrah, they have someone else driving. I think a lot of us don't think about that kind of stuff. And then the whole COVID part, of course, it's such a strange situation, and glad it's over, and that we've gone through that. So, at what point do you have the idea for the company you now run, which I also have to get into the name. I was definitely curious about that. Um, I was gonna wear a blue shirt, but it's in the laundry, so I didn't wear one. And that was just to, yeah, you got yours. I've got a blue tie on at least, you know. But can
Okay,
you
thank
tell
you.
us a little, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so and you're it's not because you just said that. I was in between blue shirt and blue tie, right? I know it, not because I know it
Right,
has nothing to do with what I do, right? It's an agency, right? And I don't know. I felt like, there was no AI at the time. It was back in 2021. And I just formed a new company that was like a marketing agency. And back then, you used this thing called Google. Yeah, we all use Google, but before Claude and ChatGPT, all the LLMs, I just Googled like what's a good idea for a marketing agency, and one of the things that came up was Blueshirt Media. And I'm like, that because marketing agencies are usually named like funky names, so I figured that would be neutral and out of the way. So that's why I picked that name. Yeah.
oh wow, okay. It was not the origin story I was expecting.
Yeah, it's not. I was wearing a blue shirt that day. That's the origin story.
And now you always have to wear a blue shirt pretty much.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't always, but I try to. Yeah,
yeah,
I have
yeah,
a lot in my closet.
for sure. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what exactly do you do? So, do you help addiction treatment centers install the AI you've created to help answer the phone calls, or what kind of is the process?
Yeah, so very simply, we create a done-for-you product, meaning that I work with treatment centers exclusively for a lot of reasons that most of them we just went over.
Right.
Um, but also jumping back to that sober transport real quick is understanding how admissions departments, are really in my opinion, the most important people in the treatment center. They're the people that could take the call, whatever, and all the other things they do. They're so spread so thin in little centers and in big centers, just alike. So that's why, along with overnight answering, we do long hold times, drop calls, any way that a call comes in that they can't do. So talking about that moment of clarity, let's just say we call a larger center, right? And it's a prime time for calls, let's say. So what happens is that people go, they're on hold. That moment of clarity may lose it. So we
Mhm.
have AI will come on and say, hey, Joe, it's Mr. Whiskey from ABC Treatment Center. Hey, can you want to give us some preliminary information so we keep them engaged, the AI. Our AI sounds just like a person, but it's always identifies as an AI agent. So we don't try to misrepresent anybody or anything. It's an AI agent. We also let the caller know the call's been recorded. So the call goes into the treatment center CRM. So what we're able to do is they have the information that the AI collects from already in. So when they get on the call, or it's the next day, or whatever it is, they already have the information that they need. Um, we also ask the client in the beginning of the call if they want a text message summary of the call. If they say yes and they opt in, we send a text message. We can also, once they opt in, we could also, if it's an overnight call, for example, we could also send them a reminder in the morning. We can have, we also do in situations like that, AI calling if they prefer a phone call. Once we have permission to send, they opt in, that's what we do. So yeah, so it's multifaceted. It's any, really, the simplest way to put it, it's anywhere the treatment center's funnel of how leads come in. It's any holes in there. Where, like I said, before in the beginning, we're not there to replace anybody. We're just there to fill in the gaps with a compassionate, human sounding agent. And I'll just say this is, we don't have a out of the box um, model, right? I do demos for people; they're out of the box, right? But I sit with the treatment center and I find out what do they want to accomplish. Obviously, I do all the AI stuff on my end, right? But it's done for you, meaning that it fits your treatment center, which helps get more people in the treatment and streamline the process more. So yeah, so that's really the whole blue shirt media idea.
And how long have you been doing that for again?
Yeah, yeah. I've been doing this 1 year. I, the company's been open for we, other projects, other things we were doing, um, and I have a VA, a full time VA, that does work for me that fills in the gaps that the AI. I'm like any other business. I have a developer that I work with that helps me with anything that I can't figure out. Mainly, I'm the frontline guy. So yeah, so no partners, just me, really.
Right, and that first year is always both the best and the most difficult year for a couple different reasons. So, how has it been going, and where do you see the future kind of expanding to?
I'm going to answer you. I sound like you're a reporter, but you're not. I'm going to answer the second question first.
Okay.
I've been asked this. I've done a bunch of podcasts, and I'm asked that question. Where is it going? I can't. It's here where I am. It's 10 a.m. Almost 10 a.m. I can't tell you where AI will be at 5 o'clock today. That's how fast
Yeah.
it's moving. I wish I knew where we were going, but yeah. So it's been going good. The clients we have, are stay with us. Um, keep going. And my goal is to put the best product possible. What's the main, like, what's the idea? The idea is, how do we help more people get into treatment that are already looking for help? Obviously there's other steps to this whole that have nothing to do with me.
Right.
Business development, counselors, all different stages of the center, of the centers. So what I do is I try to just stick to my niche. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is we have another thing that we do along the same lines is when you call, let's say you called a treatment center today, right? And you hung up, or you went to a treatment center and you left in 3 days, right? Or you were started to do the form, and then admissions called you back. Nobody under 50 answers the phone anyway. So if admissions tries to call you back, addicts most likely won't answer the phone. So we call those people inactive people, right? They've shown interest through marketing, through Facebook ads, Google ads, whatever, however they came in the door. Most centers have this huge file of people that they don't have. Admissions is dealing with the guy that calls now. They don't have the time to go back. Even alumni, it's hard for that. So what we do is we get the client commercially approved to send text message. That's a process that we have to take the client through, because the phone companies got together 20 years ago and said, we're not going to let us be email. So they regulate, like, you got to sign up, be a legitimate business. Otherwise, you probably get them all day too. You get these calls to say this is spam, or text messages, this spam. So when we set a client up, it's the federal ID, all that. They once they're approved, their messages go through. So my point is, once their messages go through, we take the file, we arrange, we send a message again. basic. Hi, it's Dave. Let's just say it's usually them, but never me. But Dave from ABC Treatment. Just want to let you know. Just want to see how things are going. Something under 160 character, easy. If they engage with that text message, then AI will engage back with them. Just to kind of, again, up to the treatment center, how far they want to go with the qualifications. As soon as they um, hit that like uh, point where the treatment center says, yeah, maybe this, we got a chance here, they have a click to call button. There also information is also going into their network so they could call if they wanted to or text, however they want to do it. When you asked in the beginning of the interview about like how my personal experience came into that, I was that guy in a rehab CRM that was never contacted. Now, I'm not blaming the rehab by any means. People want help, they can get it. But if they can't, if they have all these people they can't reach, and we can bring one person back a month, you know, we, as you know from what your experience in this podcast, you never know how that one life will change, and could change, two people, three people, whatever it is. It's big. It is a business. So financially, it's a good thing for them. But more importantly, they're able to engage with people. So not everybody comes back to treatment, obviously, or else they would have, no time for anything. Sometimes people are just following up, checking in. Hey, I'm good, whatever. So they have able to build more data. But what I said earlier, nobody under 50 is really going to, you definitely are under 50. You for sure are just, I'm going to contact you via text message, right? That's how we're going to connect if you're that person. And I'll just say this last thing about it. Picture the dinner table. You're, let's say, 25 years old. You've been in treatment twice already, and you get a call from a treatment center. Mom and dad and your sister, brother, whatever, are sitting at the table. You're not going to take that call. You don't want the family to do it. But if I reach out during text, via text to the client, then what
Mm.
happens is the client is able to, kind of engage with something less threatening than a phone call, and also the proven way of communication to people, younger people. I say younger, but people today. And I, like you, I get valid text messages from businesses I do business with, and I respond to them. But it's the only thing that's 100% read rate. You may not respond, you may hit unsubscribe, whatever it is, but you're going to read it. So yeah, that's we call that lead re-engagement.
Mm. No, I agree with all this. I think, the importance is we're helping get anyone we can. There's plenty of people who are going to say, I hate AI, I'm not talking to this, or I'm not going to answer that text, or I'm not going to answer that call, like you said. But it's not detracting or pushing anyone away, right? What we're doing is we're helping get some people who we're going to be missed out on. And so I think it's really important, and like you said, you never know how it's going to change a life. And it's the treatment world is, if it were a water system, it's one full of leakage, right? Not because it's poorly designed, but because of just the way the water itself moves. And you're helping create a secondary system to try to catch whatever spillover you can and return it back to the main system, and it's better than if you had nothing. So I agree 100%. This is really important work, and I hope to continue to see the expansion. That's other addiction treatment centers, hearing this podcast or finding your website, whatever it is, and saying, hey, you know what? We need to do something like that, and we need to get as many people as we can. So I encourage everyone listening, if you're not an addiction treatment center, which I doubt everyone listening is, if you're someone who's been affected by addiction, whether personally or in your family, which most families now have been affected by addiction, please help spread this information, maybe to your local treatment center or to anyone that knows someone. I think that's what this is about, that expansion, because the more people we can reach, the more people we can help. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. That's what we're meant to do, is serve and help one another. And like you said, addiction is a terribly painful thing. It's a very difficult thing to fight. I've had a lot of episodes, probably over 50 to 100 episodes of people whose lives were ruined by addiction, not just the addicts themselves, but all the people around them, from lost marriages to DUIs to jail time to overdosing to all kinds of stuff. People that do desperate things in addiction, even prostitution. So if we can help prevent that and intervene more, I think that's a beautiful thing. And we're going to have your website in the description below, of course, for people to check out. And you already said your message that you want everyone to take away, but if you just wanted to, just reshare that again for people to really reflect on.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, even more important than spreading my word, because we do, I appreciate that the company Blueshirt Media, that's all good stuff for me. But for you, what you can do is if you're struggling today, I told my was what upfront about my story. It took me. I came in at 16, 33, and 50, and I could tell you it's never too late if
Amen.
you're if you're using drugs against your own will, or if you're just not sure where you're at, don't play it out. There's help available. Local treatment centers, you know, community groups, 12-step fellowships, church, Medicaid, whatever works, there's hope for you. You can do this. So just however you can, just ask for help. Believe me, the benefits are worth it.
100%. So, Mr. Sichel, thank you so much for not just guesting today, but for what you do. And like I said, I hope to see it reach a lot of people and touch a lot of lives. So, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Whiskey. I appreciate it.